Good morning, happy Monday morning, and thank you for joining me on 10 Minutes to Get More, where I share tips, tools, and techniques to get more from your career and more from your commercial teams. And today's topic really is on both sides of that, what you can do as an individual and what your team and your company can be doing. So I'm talking today about what I've learned about how we can use AI in travel. This is based on 3 events that I've been to in the last month. Firstly, Global Revenue Forum, which was at the end of January, which is aimed at revenue management and commercial leadership of the future. Then I was at last week the first No Vacancy in London, which is for accommodation providers, and there were a lot of interesting travel tech and hospitality tech providers there too. And I was also at the first HR in Travel conference called Engage. HR in Travel is a membership community for HR leaders in travel. And I was there giving a workshop on imposter syndrome. And what's ironic is I'm now feeling imposter syndrome about sharing AI with you because I am so far from being the expert on AI. But I thought that's what would make this actually really helpful is that I'm not the expert, so I can hopefully translate what I've learned into normal person's language and help those of you that aren't experts as well. So if you want to drop any comments in the chat, let me know who you are, where you're coming from, any questions, I'll do my best to answer. So as I said, AI is such a hot topic. We can almost glaze over. Every single event nowadays is having conversations about AI, conferences about AI. But so much discussion is either really high level and not practical enough, or it's too technical. And for those people like me that aren't the experts, it feels too difficult. So as a total layperson for the world of AI, but who's heard a lot about it in the last few weeks, I'm sharing the common themes that I see for the travel industry and the people who are in it. So what is the point of using AI? Why do we need to use it? I really like this quote from Michael Cohen, founder of Gain Advisors, on his panel last week. AI is helping us close the gap between intention and transaction, between what we want to get done and it actually happening. So, for example, if you're thinking about hotels, on a hotel website, for example, or hotel AI call centers that a lot of companies are using now, we need fewer people to be involved. There's less chance of those systems becoming overwhelmed if we're using AI, and we can close that gap quicker between someone wanting to book or someone wanting to find out some information. It can also close that gap between what you want to get done and it actually happening for you in any work that you need to get done. It's helpful for your customers, but it's also helpful for you in your daily workflow. So you can think about what you need or want to get done, and AI can probably help you get it done quicker. One of the panel moderators said intent is the new RevPAR. So what does that mean? It means understanding what the person wants. So your customer, what do they actually want? And how do you capture that intent much quicker in a more personalized way? And that is what is going to make you profitable versus other people that aren't using AI to help with that. James Lemon from Stripe and used to work at IHG was talking about the kind of old school timeframes that we used to use in terms of implementing new technology. He mentioned from IHG times, it took them 4 years to decide on a new platform and another 4 years to implement it. You can't be waiting 8 years now to implement new technology. Things are moving so fast. If you don't use AI, you'll get left behind, but also you have to start learning and understanding how to use it so that you can close the gap between what you want to get done and actually doing it. Another really common theme of the week was about the complicated tech stacks that hotels have. So hotel tech by nature is built to solve a niche part of the problem, meaning the hotels now have so many different products that they're working with. Milena Kirandiska from Muse said that even the most simple hotel tech stacks have at least 7 different platforms and providers for hotels. So if you're in a provider, a tech partner to hotels, you need to be thinking about how you can simplify this. How can you do more for the hotel so they need to work with fewer partners and build more trust with you? Some companies are doing some really interesting stuff with this. For example, Muse shared a few months ago this really interesting circle of all the different platforms, because they've been buying lots of companies, right? All these different platforms and products they provide to hotels, and they're creating what's called a semantic layer between all of those products. What is a semantic layer? That is powered by AI, and it means it's kind of like the translator between the different platforms. You don't have to export all the data from here and put it over there in order for them to communicate. You've got this interesting kind of connection that's happening between the platforms powered by AI, so it can just go and retrieve the data needed and pass it over there. Great for compliance, but great for just making things much easier without having to build API connections between all these different platforms. And one of my clients, Echo Bell, who are creating a great web app for hotels, is also working on something similar. So watch this space. So what do we need within travel specifically from AI? Firstly, we need a hospitality-specific language model, so not just using generic large language models. So for example, if you go to ChatGPT, that is getting the information from the whole of the internet and looking at patterns from the whole of the internet. So when you ask ChatGPT a question, you're basically saying, can you give me an answer that seems like an answer that a lot of humans would give according to the internet? And that's where things can start to sound really, really generic. So if you use, for example, ChatGPT, the normal generic ChatGPT, to answer your reviews, they're going to be really obviously AI. They're going to be not very personal, and they're not necessarily going to get you the commercial advantage that you want to get. So we need to build our agents out or build a specific language model and only use that which is related to the goals we want to achieve and the industry that we're working in. I think that's super interesting. There's also a need for all of our systems to communicate within the tech stack. So for our hotel partners, we need all those different platforms and all those different goals that they're trying to achieve to actually be united and be able to communicate with each other. There's also a need for a really human tone and communication. There was an interesting panel on whether chatbots will replace concierges, and in short, the answer was probably not. But what we need from chatbots, AI agents, etc., is that human tone and communication, perhaps even building in some pauses that make it feel more natural for us, and using, those little polite things that we do for British people. We do these little polite things, and we need to build that into AI so that people can trust it more. And really interestingly, someone mentioned what we need is the intelligence part of artificial intelligence, right? So we don't want just a reactive answering of questions. We want them to be proactive, communicating with us, upselling and cross-selling on our behalf. So, hey, I noticed you went to the gym this morning. Do you want a protein-rich lunch as part of room service, or whatever it is that's proactive and helping us with our commercial goals as well? Patrick Luce from Profit Room shared that they are going too far with AI, so they know how far is far enough. And I thought that was a really interesting concept, because many of us are just getting started with AI, but there's so much that could be done. It's almost mind-blowing. We can't really understand how much can be done. So that's why they're going too far to know how far is far enough. The point of all of this is that by making it faster from what you want to do to then making it happen means that there's more time for human actions where we can really add value. Okay, so leadership, creative thinking, critical thinking, and from the HR perspective, those development conversations, for example, and doing those things really well. Holiday Extras, for example, is using AI for the initial parts of their performance management conversations. So it's a conversational bot that helps you fill in your development form. But then the human conversation has to come as well. And people should have more time, meaning they should do it better. But often, as humans, we procrastinate on that stuff because it feels a bit scary. We don't focus on doing that because it's not doing our job. And we can get busy with busy work rather than strategic work. I've seen that in my clients. They avoid these more complex actions that need a bit more thinking, that need a bit more human connection, but they're precisely the jobs that will set us apart in the age of AI. AI can do the busy work, so you've really got to step up. And that brings me nicely onto my next point. So what does it mean for us as humans and leaders? At Global Revenue Forum, Vasilis Siropoulos, who's the CEO of Juyo, shared one of my favorite presentations so far this year. What is the evolving role of a revenue manager or a commercial leader in a hotel considering AI? And essentially what we need now is a team of creative consultants that use AI, not a bunch of operators. We don't need people doing the busy work. We need people that can think creatively and critically to enable AI to do the work. That means a mental shift from being someone who doesn't use AI to being someone that uses AI in their role to someone that's integrated it fully. And then the top level is really being a creative consultant who deploys AI to test things out, process massive data, and really leverage this to gain commercial advantage. So that is a really different way of thinking about our jobs compared to how we've been thinking about them for the last 50 years. On the HR side, what we then need to kind of change is looking at our job descriptions. We still see job descriptions asking for experience in Excel, years of experience in specific travel industry tools, and that's just not going to be necessary. What we're going to need is more people to be leaders, and that means more power skills, creative thinking, critical thinking, and adaptability. And the question is then, as we move towards smaller commercial teams with more seniority, these creative consultants, because AI is removing all those minor jobs that we don't need to do, what is the next generation going to do as they come into the workforce? And I don't have an answer for that. but that's something to keep an eye on. What is Gen Alpha actually going to do, and how are they going to enter the workforce? Because they need time to develop those leadership skills. So how can you get started with AI if you haven't already? The common theme that I heard from multiple people is don't just do it to keep up with the Joneses. Think about what is really meaningful for your company. Feel the need that you have between the intent that you have and the transaction that needs to happen. For hotels, you've got support at front of house, like client-facing communications, agents that can help your clients and customers book quicker. Back of house, you can automate those repetitive processes like finance, reservations, what's the word? At the end of the day, when you have to settle all of your accounts, that can all be sorted with AI. Michael Cohen, again, his advice for hotels is actually take a risk, try out an AI-specific company rather than a legacy travel tech company that's adding AI. So an AI-specific company that specializes in hospitality, and there's lots of them about, which is not just a chatbot, but multiple streams of support for your hotel. Okay, a chatbot is like level 1 of AI, but there's multiple things that can happen. So take a risk on a company that's really AI forwards, because they'll be able to adapt much quicker. Your partners also should be able to take on the majority of risk in terms of compliance. So having great partners means you don't have to sweat about those things. And also the development of new products. You shouldn't be having to look for a new tech partner every time, as your partners should be on the front foot. So that's the kind of conversations you need to have. In terms of how to adopt AI into your company, Fabio Sackerman from Expedia, VP of Learning and Development at Expedia, talked about meeting people where they are. You can't force people on a journey to use AI if they're not there yet. So understand where people are, how much will they have to use AI, how much skill they currently have, and then support them with that. So he was talking about the 2 A's of ability and adoption. So training people and supporting people to have the skills they need for these tools, and then also measuring how many people are choosing to go back and use it, and then iterate and go from there and gradually build up everybody's ability. Another interesting human angle. So Henry Rose Lee spoke at Global Revenue Forum, who's an expert in generational trends and leveraging the skills of all different generations. And her idea I really loved, it is using the younger generations who understand technology better and AI better with the experience and the networks and the leadership skills of Gen X and thus older millennials, and together put them in innovation hubs. So the older people can really understand the problems of the business, the impact it's going to have. The younger people are often on the coalface and know the tech problems that need solving, and they're also more creative and see things differently. So together you can really leverage those skills. That's quite a lot. So a few questions for you just to get thinking about. What's one small step that you could take to use more AI in your own role? And how might you change how you speak about AI with your hotel partners now you know a bit more about it? Thank you so much for joining me. Really, really appreciate it and hope it was helpful. Would love to hear any questions or comments for you, and have a great week.